The restaurant's chandeliers shimmered like droplets of captured sunlight, scattering golden reflections across white marble floors. Every corner glowed with quiet elegance, a world meant for the rich, powerful, and untouchable. But in the midst of that glitz stood a young woman named Elena Rossi, clutching a tray with trembling hands, her black apron slightly faded from too many washes. She'd been working since dawn, her feet aching, her smile forced, yet still she served each customer with grace. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a survivor. What no one knew was that she once dreamed of being among those who now looked down on her. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that dignity can't be bought, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us tell stories that prove compassion is worth more than gold. It was a Saturday night, the busiest of the week, when Leonardo Bianchi, a billionaire tech mogul known for his arrogance, walked in with his entourage. Cameras often followed him, but tonight he wanted no spotlight, only a lavish meal after a day of negotiations. He wore a crisp black suit, his watch gleaming like a second sun on his wrist. Everyone in the restaurant noticed. The staff whispered nervously, knowing one mistake could mean their job. Elena didn't have time for fear. She had rent due in 2 days, her mother's medicine to buy, and a younger brother whose school fees she was barely managing. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, adjusted her tray, and walked toward his table with the calmness of someone who'd learned to swallow pride. Leonardo didn't even glance up when she greeted them. His men laughed loudly, ordering expensive wine as if it were water. Elena stood silently, pen ready, eyes on the notepad, when one of them nudged Leonardo and whispered something in Italian, something cruel. Leonardo smirked, looked Elena up and down, and replied in Italian too, his words sliced through the air like glass. Guarda come povera. Probabilmente non capisce nemmeno cosa diciamo. Look how poor she is. She probably doesn't even understand what we're saying. The men laughed. One even clapped him on the shoulder. Elena froze for a moment, pretending not to understand. But inside, something broke. Not because of his insult, she'd been judged before, but because of the effortless cruelty behind it. For a moment, she wanted to walk away. But then, something stronger than pain rose within her. Pride, dignity, and a quiet fire she'd kept buried for too long. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm, and in perfect Italian. Capisco perfettamente. E so anche che un uomo davvero ricco non ha bisogno di umiliare gli altri per sentirsi potente. I understand perfectly, and I also know that a truly rich man doesn't need to humiliate others to feel powerful. The laughter died, forks clinked softly against plates. The entire restaurant seemed to pause. Leonardo's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise and embarrassment flashing across his face. Elena didn't stop. She continued in flawless Italian, her words carrying the weight of all the nights she'd been treated like she didn't belong. She told him that she'd studied linguistics at the University of Florence before her family lost everything when her father died, that she worked 3 jobs not because she lacked intelligence, but because she refused to give up. Her voice didn't shake once. The quiet dignity in her tone was sharper than anger. When she finished, the restaurant was silent. Leonardo said nothing, only nodded slowly as she placed his order and walked away. His companions avoided his gaze, suddenly uncomfortable. But while Elena kept working, pretending nothing happened, inside her chest her heart was pounding. Not from fear, but from relief. She had finally stood up, not just to him, but to every person who'd ever made her feel small. As the night wore on, Leonardo couldn't focus on his food. The words replayed in his head again and again. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Controlled, intelligent, proud. He wasn't used to being called out, least of all by someone who had every reason to stay silent. When the meal ended, he asked to see her again. The manager rushed to Elena, nervous and apologetic, fearing she'd done something wrong. But when she approached, Leonardo stood up. For the first time that evening, he looked her in the eye. He switched to English, his tone softer. "You speak Italian beautifully," he said. Elena smiled faintly. "I learned it from my father," she replied. He used to say languages connect hearts faster than money ever could. That line hit him harder than she intended. He left a large tip, thanked her politely, and walked away. But for the first time in years, Leonardo Bianchi couldn't stop thinking about a waitress. Not for her looks, but for the mirror she had unknowingly held up to his soul. Days passed. Elena returned to her routine. Long shifts, cheap instant coffee, and the constant hum of exhaustion. She didn't think she'd ever see him again. But a week later, her manager called her into the office. "There's someone here to see you," he said, eyes wide. It was Leonardo. Alone this time. No entourage, no arrogance. He stood by the door, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. Her name tag had told him her name, and he'd asked around to learn what flowers meant resilience. "I came to apologize," he said quietly. "And to ask you something." Elena hesitated, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Billionaires didn't show up to apologize, not in her world. Leonardo explained that after that night he'd gone home and looked her up. He found nothing. No social media, no trace. He realized she was someone who didn't live to impress others. He confessed he hadn't stopped thinking about how wrong he was, about how he'd become the kind of man his mother once warned him never to be. He offered to fund her return to university, no strings attached. Elena listened silently. Her heart wanted to believe him, but life had taught her to be cautious. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly. "You just needed to learn that kindness doesn't depend on wealth." Leonardo smiled faintly. "Maybe, but sometimes meeting someone kind is the only thing that can make a man want to change." Elena studied his face. He looked sincere, not the proud mogul from that night, but a man trying to make peace with himself. She finally nodded. "If you truly want to help," she said, "then start by treating everyone with the same respect you give to those who can benefit you." That moment became the start of something unexpected, not a romance, but a quiet transformation. Leonardo began visiting the restaurant often, not as a billionaire, but as a student of humility. He spoke to the staff, learned their names, even worked one night in the kitchen just to understand what their lives were like. The world saw it as eccentric behavior, but for him, it was a silent promise to change. Meanwhile, Elena began studying again through evening classes. With Leonardo's sponsorship, she finished her degree in linguistics within 2 years. She never asked for more, she only wanted a chance to rebuild. Years later, during a conference in Rome, Elena stood on stage as the keynote speaker for a global education charity. She spoke about dignity, perseverance, and how empathy can cross every barrier, language, class, and wealth. In the front row sat Leonardo, watching silently, pride glinting in his eyes. When she finished, the audience stood and applauded. Cameras flashed and journalists rushed to interview her. Someone asked how she knew Leonardo Bianchi. She smiled, looked directly into the lens, and said, "He once taught me what arrogance looks like. Then he showed me what redemption feels like." That line went viral within hours. But for Elena, fame wasn't the reward. The real victory was knowing she'd kept her dignity intact, even when the world tried to strip it away. As the applause faded, Leonardo walked up to her. "You turned your pain into something powerful," he said quietly. She smiled warmly. "And you turned your power into something human." They stood there for a moment, two people from opposite worlds, now connected not by guilt or gratitude, but by growth. So if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more people who believe that change begins with humility and courage. And before you leave, we have a special request. Comment below and tell us, have you ever judged someone before knowing their story? Because sometimes the person you underestimate today might be the one who changes your life tomorrow.